Music world, the entertainment planet that lost its orbit. Picture this. It's 1979, and while most Americans are discovering music through cramped record store bins or whatever their local radio DJ decides to spin, a small group of entrepreneurs in Albany, New York had a different vision. They imagined massive entertainment destinations where families could spend entire afternoons browsing through thousands of records, tapes, and eventually CDs, while also picking up movies, books, and even grabbing a bite to eat. This wasn't just retail, this was entertainment as lifestyle. Music World opened its first location as a sprawling 20,000 square foot warehouse-style store, dwarfing the typical 2,000 square foot record shops that dominated the landscape. The concept was revolutionary for its time. Create destinations so comprehensive and entertaining that customers would drive from neighboring states just to experience what they called the entertainment planet. Within just 3 years of opening, Music World had expanded to 12 locations across upstate New York and Vermont, with each store averaging sales of over $2 million annually. The company's founders had struck gold by recognizing that entertainment retail could be both massive in scale and intensely personal in experience, offering listening stations where customers could sample albums before purchase, knowledgeable staff who could discuss everything from prog rock to jazz fusion, and inventory so deep that musicians themselves would shop there for rare imports and B-sides. The early 1980s represented Music World's golden age, a period when the company seemed to anticipate every major shift in the entertainment industry before their competitors even knew change was coming. When compact discs emerged in 1982, Music World was among the first regional chains to dedicate significant floor space to the new format, often carrying over 5,000 CD titles when most stores stocked fewer than 500. Their buyers developed relationships directly with record labels, bypassing traditional distributors to secure exclusive releases and limited editions that drew collectors from across the Northeast. By 1985, the average Music World location had grown to 25,000 square feet, with some flagship stores reaching 35,000 square feet, making them larger than most department stores of the era. The company had perfected a layout that guided customers through what they called discovery zones, carefully designed paths that exposed shoppers to new genres and artists while they searched for familiar favorites. Revenue per square foot reached an impressive $180, nearly double the industry average, as customers regularly spent over an hour per visit and left with multiple purchases. Music World's success wasn't just about size. They had created a culture where part-time employees were often musicians themselves, lending authenticity and expertise that transformed casual browsers into devoted customers. The company's annual sales had reached $47 million by 1986, with 18 locations generating profit margins that made Music World one of the most successful regional entertainment retailers in the country. Music World's business model thrived on understanding their customers in ways that would seem almost quaint by today's data-driven standards, but was revolutionary for the analog age. Store managers kept handwritten logs of customer requests, tracking everything from obscure jazz recordings to the latest heavy metal imports, using this intelligence to inform purchasing decisions and special orders. The company pioneered the concept of entertainment events within retail spaces, hosting in-store performances by local bands, album release parties, and even vinyl swap meets that drew hundreds of participants on weekends. Their inventory management system, advanced for its time, tracked not just sales but also browsing patterns, noting which albums customers picked up but didn't purchase, information they used to negotiate better pricing with distributors and labels. Music World's marketing approach was grassroots and authentic. They sponsored local concerts, advertised on college radio stations, and maintained relationships with music journalists who would often mention the stores in articles about regional music scenes. By the late 1980s, the company had expanded beyond music to become full entertainment destinations, with dedicated sections for movies, books, magazines, and even early video games, creating what retail analysts called the department store of pop culture. Their customer loyalty program, launched in 1987, was paper-based but sophisticated, offering discounts based on purchase history and early access to limited releases, features that kept customers coming back even when competitors offered lower prices. The company's success had attracted attention from larger retailers and potential investors, but Music World's founders remained committed to their regional focus. believing that intimate knowledge of local markets was their greatest competitive advantage. The first cracks in Music World's foundation appeared in the early 1990s, though they seemed like minor tremors at the time, rather than warnings of the earthquake to come. National chains like Tower Records and Virgin Megastore began expanding aggressively into secondary markets, bringing unprecedented marketing budgets and purchasing power that allowed them to offer deeper discounts on popular titles. Music World's response was to double down on their strengths: superior customer service, deeper catalog selections, and community connections that national chains couldn't replicate overnight. However, the economics of the entertainment retail business were shifting in ways that favored scale over specialization. While Music World might stock 15 different Miles Davis albums, including rare imports and reissues, customers increasingly wanted the convenience of one-stop shopping for the latest Billboard hits at the lowest possible prices. The company's inventory costs began climbing as they struggled to maintain their comprehensive selection while also matching competitors' prices on bestsellers, squeezing the profit margins that had funded their expansion throughout the 1980s. By 1992, Music World's same-store sales had declined for the first time in company history, dropping 4% compared to the previous year, while their average transaction size remained steady but customer traffic decreased. The rise of big-box retailers like Walmart and Target, who treated music as a loss leader to drive foot traffic to higher-margin merchandise, created a pricing environment that specialized retailers simply couldn't match. Music World found themselves caught between the rock of declining margins and the hard place of customer expectations shaped by mass-market pricing, a position that would define their struggles throughout the decade. The mid-1990s brought changes to the entertainment industry that challenged every assumption Music World had built their business on, transforming from manageable competitive pressures into existential threats. The emergence of online retailers, particularly Amazon starting in 1995, introduced a shopping experience that combined Music World's deep catalog with prices that even big-box stores couldn't match. While Music World's management initially dismissed online shopping as a niche market for tech-savvy early adopters, their customers began requesting titles they had seen online at prices significantly below what brick-and-mortar stores could offer. The company's attempts to launch their own e-commerce presence in 1997 were hampered by limited technology budgets and a website that felt more like a digital catalog than a shopping destination, lacking the recommendation engines and user reviews that were becoming standard online. Simultaneously, changes in music consumption habits were undermining Music World's core value proposition. The album as an artistic and commercial unit was giving way to single-song purchasing through early digital services and mixtapes created from radio recordings. The company's vast floor space, once their greatest asset, became a liability as customers spent less time browsing and more time seeking specific purchases they had already researched online. Music World's rental costs, locked into long-term leases signed during their expansion years, consumed an increasingly large percentage of revenue as sales per square foot declined to $95 by 1998, barely half of what they had achieved a decade earlier. The company closed 3 underperforming locations that year, the first closures in their history, and began renegotiating leases to reduce their footprint, moves that signaled to both employees and customers that the entertainment planet was contracting. Music World's leadership recognized that survival required fundamental changes to their business model, leading to a series of adaptation attempts that showed both creativity and desperation. In 1999, the company launched Music World Cafe, adding coffee shops to 5 locations in an attempt to create social spaces that would encourage longer visits and impulse purchases. They expanded their video game sections significantly, recognizing that gaming was becoming a major entertainment category, and hired younger employees who could speak knowledgeably about PlayStation and Nintendo titles. Music World also attempted to capitalize on the vinyl revival that was beginning among collectors and audiophiles, dedicating premium floor space to new and used records at a time when most retailers were eliminating vinyl entirely. The company partnered with local colleges to create textbook sections in stores near campuses, hoping to drive consistent traffic during back-to-school seasons and diversify their revenue streams beyond entertainment media. However, these initiatives required significant capital investment at precisely the time when Music World's cash flow was tightest, forcing them to finance expansion through debt that would later prove unsustainable. Their most ambitious attempt at reinvention came in 2000 with the launch of Music World Digital, offering CD burning stations where customers could create custom compilations, a service that briefly generated excitement and premium pricing but quickly faced legal challenges from record labels concerned about copyright infringement. Despite these efforts, the company's annual revenue had fallen to $28 million by 2001, a 40% decline from their peak, while their debt service consumed nearly 15% of gross sales, leaving little room for the continued innovation that survival demanded. The final chapter of Music World's story unfolded against the backdrop of an entertainment industry revolution that made their business model not just obsolete, but actively counterproductive to how consumers wanted to discover and purchase music. The launch of iTunes in 2001, followed by the iTunes Store in 2003, represented everything that Music World was not: instant, convenient, affordable, and offering virtually unlimited selection without the overhead of physical stores. Music World's response to digital music had been defensive rather than adaptive, viewing file sharing and digital downloads as threats to combat rather than customer preferences to embrace. The company's final expansion attempt, opening 2 new locations in 2001, proved disastrous as both stores failed to reach even 60% of projected sales levels, draining cash reserves that could have funded a more aggressive digital transition. By 2002, Music World was closing 1 location every few months, each closure triggering lease penalties and inventory liquidation costs that accelerated their financial decline. The company's last-ditch effort to find a buyer or merger partner was complicated by their lease obligations and inventory that was increasingly difficult to value in a market where physical music sales were declining by double digits annually. Music World's final stores offered discounts of up to 70% on remaining inventory, creating the sad spectacle of desperate clearance sales in spaces that had once been temples to music discovery. The company's founders, who had created something genuinely special in the entertainment retail landscape, found themselves managing a controlled demolition rather than a business, ensuring that employees received final paychecks and customers could redeem gift certificates before the inevitable end. When Music World closed its final location in December 2003, it marked the end of more than just a regional retail chain. It represented the conclusion of an entire era in how Americans discovered and purchased music. The company's 24-year run had spanned the golden age of album-oriented rock, the CD boom, the rise of alternative music, and the beginning of the digital revolution, serving as both participant and witness to transformations in musical culture that went far beyond retail. Music World's legacy lived on in the thousands of musicians who had found inspiration browsing their aisles, the couples who had bonded over shared musical discoveries in their listening stations, and the communities that had gathered for in-store performances and events that treated music as social experience rather than mere commodity. The company's failure wasn't due to poor management or lack of vision, but rather to their success in creating a business model so perfectly adapted to a specific moment in cultural history that it couldn't survive when that moment passed. In many ways, Music World had been too good at what they did, creating experiences so rich and comprehensive that they required economic conditions and customer behaviors that were disappearing even as the company reached its peak. Their story serves as a reminder that in rapidly evolving industries, yesterday's competitive advantages can become tomorrow's insurmountable obstacles, and that sometimes the most successful companies are also the most vulnerable to disruption. The empty storefronts that once housed Music World locations eventually became everything from fitness centers to furniture stores. But for those who remembered, these spaces retained an almost sacred quality, having once been places where the soundtrack of their lives had been discovered, purchased, and cherished in ways that no algorithm or recommendation engine could ever replicate. The broader implications of Music World's rise and fall extend far beyond entertainment retail, offering insights into how technological disruption, changing consumer behaviors, and economic evolution can transform thriving businesses into historical footnotes within remarkably short time frames. Music World had succeeded by understanding that purchasing music was about more than transaction. It was about discovery, community, and the tactile pleasure of owning physical artifacts that represented personal identity and cultural connection. Their stores had been designed as environments where serendipity could flourish, where customers might arrive seeking a specific album, but leave with discoveries that would influence their musical tastes for years to come. The company's employees had served as cultural intermediaries, bridging the gap between mainstream and underground, helping customers navigate the overwhelming abundance of musical choice that characterized the pre-digital era. Music World's inventory philosophy had been fundamentally democratic, believing that every genre and artist deserved representation, from the most commercial pop to the most esoteric experimental music, creating spaces that celebrated musical diversity in ways that algorithm-driven recommendations never could. Their business model had been built on the assumption that music lovers would always want to browse, discover, and own music in physical formats, assumptions that seemed so fundamental as to be unquestionable until they were suddenly obsolete. The speed with which Music World's world contracted, from expansion to extinction in less than a decade, illustrates how quickly consumer behavior can shift when new technologies offer superior solutions to existing problems. Perhaps most significantly, Music World's story demonstrates that being right about what customers want today provides no guarantee of understanding what they'll want tomorrow, and that success in rapidly evolving markets requires not just adaptation, but complete reinvention of core business assumptions. The company that had once been the entertainment planet had lost its orbit not through any failure of execution, but through the simple reality that the gravitational forces holding their business model together had fundamentally changed, leaving them adrift in space where they had once been the center of their customers' musical universe.